Hello and welcome to Home Recording Bootcamp TV. I am your host, Ronan Chris Murphy. I am a record producer, mixer, engineer, and I'm here to try and help you sort through all this madness that is the world of music recording. Well, not the business side. I'll let somebody else try and figure that craziness out. But we're going to be talking about the steps of recording, what goes into it. And today I'm going to try and help you understand a little bit better what the heck is mastering. And it can be a little bit confusing to try and do that because the definition of mastering has evolved over the years, and it's very confusing for a lot of people. And even among professionals today, there's not really a clear consensus about what mastering is or perhaps what mastering should be. So to try and help you make a little bit of sense about this, I'm going to tell you a tiny bit about the history of mastering, how it's evolved a little bit over the years. I'm going to tell you what mastering is not, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my own personal bias and perspective on the issue. Hopefully make some sense out of all this. But let's go back a whole bunch of years to the start of mastering. Mastering originally was the process of preparing a final mix for the duplication master to go onto vinyl. You see, with vinyl, there's some very specific restrictions about what you can put onto a vinyl record. There's restrictions about dynamic range, and there's restrictions about how much of certain frequencies can be on that record. The problem is if you get the levels wrong, you run into distortion, and if you get some of the levels and the frequencies wrong, literally the needle can like bounce around on the disc. Not ideal. So the original mastering guys, and yeah, they most likely were all guys at that point, were the ones who would prepare that final mix over to the duplication master in a way that was technically correct. And I think, again, I'm just guessing on this part, is that people started to realize that when you did some of that preparation, which was done with equalization and compression, that you could actually alter or enhance the sound of the record. So progressively, mastering became more and more part of the creative team and less just the technical guy in the lab coat. And as records progressed over the decades, more and more mastering engineers started to become thought of as part of the creative team. But when the CD was introduced, the mastering game kind of changed a little bit because whether you like vinyl versus CD didn't have the same technical restrictions that vinyl had. So all of a sudden you really didn't have to worry so much about how dynamic range was on the album. You didn't have to worry about how much of certain frequencies were on the album. It really became more of an issue of you had to try and make sure the album sounded great. And really at that stage, mastering really became perceived as part of the creative team more than just the technical team. So in mastering, we've got a big range of tools available to us, even though it's just the final mix. There's things we can do with compression, with limiting, with equalization, even just tricks with phase where we're modifying the stereo imaging different than the center imaging. There's actually quite a lot that can be done at the mastering stage to enhance the recording. And so the mastering engineer is going to use any of those available tools to try and enhance the sound of the record. In terms of what's appropriate or inappropriate at the mastering stage, that's kind of a point of debate among both amateurs and professionals. Some people are kind of in the camp that mastering should do absolutely as little as possible and just help facilitate kind of clean transfer over. And other people think the mastering engineer, if needed, should really get his hands dirty and go in and do whatever it takes to make the record sound great. I do mastering for a lot of people, and I tend to fall into the latter camp. My concept is the mastering engineer's job is to do whatever it takes to make the band, the producer, and the mixer look great. So sometimes that's just, maybe a clean transfer and double checking to make sure all the levels are right. Other times it might be going in and doing some dramatic equalization or compression to really enhance it. There's certainly no Bible in terms of what I think is appropriate. It's really whatever I can do, or again, the people who I like to work with when they master my stuff are people who are going to do whatever it takes to make that sound great. But here's what mastering is not. Mastering is absolutely not some kind of plugin you use or some preset that you can use to make something mastered. You can use those kind of tools to make something louder or brighter or edgier or whatever adjective you want to use, but all that is making something brighter, making something louder, whatever that preset happens to be. And the big problem I have with things like that is mastering is really the process. It's not the tools. So what a great mastering engineer is going to do is listen to the track and understand what it needs, because some tracks come in and they're way too bright, so the mastering engineer can maybe soften the high end a little bit. Some aren't bright enough, so some you have to boost the high end. Some have very nice high end, except there's too much of one specific frequency around 7K, and you have to scoop out that to get everything to sound good. So mastering is just this whole process of sitting back, listening to the track, and making the changes that are appropriate. And there's absolutely no way that some guy on a computer on the other side of the world can program some preset that's going to determine what your track needs. Mastering is also not the process of making things loud and bright and big. That might happen on some masters, but other masters are about things sounding warm and smooth with full dynamic range, and others are about being loud and aggressive. So mastering is the creative process. It is not the tools. So singles versus albums. When we're mastering a single, we're actually just looking at the song unto itself, sitting back, listening to one song, and trying to figure out what it needs to sound its absolute best. Things actually get a little bit more difficult when you're mastering a full album, because then you have to listen to all the songs as a whole and try and make them cohesive. A really great mastering job can actually make a record that was mixed by 10 different people at 10 different studios sound like one cohesive album. And of course, also there is, when you're delivering something for CD duplication, there are some technical specs for that kind of delivery that the mastering engineer needs to make sure are correct. But really what mastering is in the modern day is that set of ears that's going to sit back, listen to the song or listen to the album as a whole, and make enhancements along the way wherever necessary. And again, really important to remember that these days, a mastering engineer is really part of the creative team. So their own personal bias will really change the outcome of the record. And the best advice I can give you if you're going to work with a mastering engineer, whether it's just the local guy in your neighborhood or one of the legendary mastering engineers, is communication, communication, communication. If you've got a vision for how you want those songs to sound, communicate that with the mastering engineer, because we might be pretty good at mastering, but we're not mind readers. And the same things that might be fantastic qualities in a record to one person are not the same things that are fantastic to another person. So really make sure that you communicate with your mastering engineer about what you're going for. And if you don't really know how to explain things in a technical way, one really good way to do that is to, if you've got one or two CDs that you love the sound of, and when you were mixing your record or working with a producer that you were going for, give them a copy of that CD and say, we were going for this. And that'll give the mastering engineer a really good understanding of how loud you were wanting things, how bright you were wanting things, and so on. So that's it, and I hope this helps a little bit. And remember, do your best to keep things simple, stay focused on the music, and the rest should take care of itself. By the way, if you notice, this is a new background. I am doing some records in Italy at the studio at the Villa Prost Docemi. I'm producing a few records and also doing a recording workshop here next week. So that's why the studio doesn't look normal.